All right, hi, I'm Jack Mitchell with the Ledger Dispatch. I think that's where I'm at. It's a Friday morning. I am here with David Anderson. David Anderson, World, David Anderson.
Good morning, world.
I met David, I want to say back in January, February maybe, on the Mule Creek State Prison water issues with the CDCR. And why don't you tell me a little bit about what occurred? You were working out there. We did a long series, or what's considered a long series, eight different stories over several months on contamination of the water coming out of Mule Creek State Prison. Can you tell us a little bit about?
Sure. We were installing a very small storm drain system that was on the western edge of the prison from mid 2017 through about December of 2017, and we were connecting that storm drain system to the existing storm drain system. And during that process, there was water being discharged from the existing storm drain system that kind of posed some problems. And we asked them to turn it off, and it was never turned off. And we had numerous assurances that there was nothing dangerous or hazardous about it.
And was this a little water or a lot of water?
It was a lot of water.
Okay.
Yeah, it posed a lot of difficulty. What should have been a very short duration project extended from more or less August through December of 2017, and even at that we did not finish. We were kind of stopped by rain, and then by December we had enough indications that there was something sketchy about the water. I approached the Regional Water Quality Control Board and asked them to look into it, and they did so immediately, and that was January 4th of 2018. And they determined that it was contaminated water.
Yeah, and in fact, there were signs put up after the fact that say this is contaminated. Although there was also some soil and some different pieces. You got sick. You're still trying to seek out help for illnesses that you think are related to this job site out at Mule Creek, which we thought might be water. You're not really sure where it could be soil.
Right.
And that basically is off of a sludge pile that when they built the new prison infill, they moved a soil pile that turned out to be not soil.
Right. It was biosolids.
Don't mean to laugh.
I know it is kind of funny though I think about it, but there was a pile of soil that was we were told was made available if we needed any soil, and we had so much water that we were dealing with that we were spooning out mud and then trying to replace it with this quote-unquote soil. And in fact, it wasn't soil at all. What it was the upper layer of the spray fields that the new Mule Creek infill project is sitting on and mixed with sludge that they used to dispose of back there. So we were really replacing contaminated mud with dried contaminated mud.
Have you been able to figure out exactly what your illnesses is, or is it something you inhaled? Is it the water? Is it
We kind of suspect it was organic solvents is probably what we inhaled. It was very dusty, and we believe there were solvents in that pile of sludge. But the nature of the solvents is such that they leave your body fairly quickly, although they leave the effects of it for up to a year. So it was really uncomfortable, and we just don't have any data that would suggest,
So the interesting thing is you go to the Regional Water Quality Control Board, say Mule Creek's got this contamination thing going on. I talk to CDCR as a reporter and say, hey, we believe there's contamination. Will you guys go on record with that? And they kind of say, there's an issue. We don't know. We're not saying it's contaminated. Regional Water Quality Control Board says, yeah, you absolutely have, and confirm and say, yes, we have a contamination from an unknown source.
Absolutely.
Is what they've said. And that was a year and a half ago?
It was late January of 2018. The regional board, when they got the lab results back, indicated that there were very high levels of fecal coliform bacteria, E. coli, grease, soap, and heavy metals.
And this is literally, I come in and ask them to go on the record with that, and that's a year later, kids. A year. I'm just trying to give you the time frame of this. Because if you go back further than that, you've had some properties off-site when they had where they opened up the storm gates and that went into the river, that they had same thing, half contamination. In fact, there's signs up down in at Mule Creek that basically say, don't get in this water. It's not going to be good.
Right. What happened was in January of 2018, I was pretty upset that we discovered how contaminated the water was, despite numerous assurances almost every day that there was no hazards there at all. It was irrigation tailwater or just groundwater or something else.
And you kind of came up with a theory after that said, okay, I'm not building this for storm drain, I'm building this as a cover-up almost, to cover up this water, this contaminated
Right.
water that's coming out. And there's really 3 systems out at Mule Creek. There's a sanitary system, sewage system, there's the stormwater system, and then there's also the prison industries system.
Well, the prison industries is inside the prison, and they have stormwater, sewer, and drinking water. So, I mean, they all share the same systems, but there are prison industries that you would have to presume are contributing to the
Well,
waste
that was
stream
one of the
coming out.
theories you're saying, and you've said there's kind of that aha moment where you say, okay, I think I know where this is coming from.
Right.
Which you look at the period of when Mule Creek is built, the fact that underneath the buildings is cast iron that has a 30-year life cycle in the perfect conditions,
Right.
under perfect conditions, and the prison, well, you can tell the theory.
Well, yeah, what happened was there was an order issued by the Regional Water Quality Control Board on February 14th telling them to investigate to find the source of this contamination, and in the meantime to discontinue any further discharges into Mule Creek. And what they did is they then were forced to redirect all of the outfall from the storm drain system back to the sewer plant. And that was actually discontinued in June and July of last year, and they don't do anything of the sort. But that order of February 14th to investigate where the source of it was coming from really kind of was a head scratcher, even for me at first. It's like, well, how could you have sewage discharges, industrial waste even, coming out of the storm drain system? You know, what would cause that? And the terminology that was used was cross connections, you know, which sort of implies that something had been connected improperly, you know, further into the prison. And as I really thought about it, and I reviewed some of the preliminary reports that came from CDCR, it just sort of dawned on me that the source of it was multiple sources, and likely from the failure of the cast iron pipes underneath all of the buildings. And I advised the water board of this in June of last year, and they agreed. They said, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense, and we're going to look into that and see if we can identify that as the source.
So how long would it take a plumber to look at the pipes? And it's one of the questions I asked actually
Right.
in my writing is how long would it take, how much would it cost? And it's basically, these master plumbers said, well, for you, Jack, I would do it for a low cost of maybe $50,000, depending on how many weeks it took and what we find. And then said it'd be about 2 weeks, $50,000 goes for you. And he said, now if it's a state, they might charge a little more, that she was laughing at. Have they looked at under the buildings?
No. Effective this date, there has been no investigation under the building.
And how much money has CDCR spent in investigating this undocumented source?
There was a claim of something on the order of $2 million.
I believe I heard $2 million. Of course, we also heard at one time that the contamination was from bird waste.
Right. The initial reports, even the final report, the initial final report that was issued from CDCR in August of last year, 2018, indicated that the source of the water was likely irrigation tailwater, groundwater, or bird waste.
Well, and even in their latest investigation, they basically said this undocumented source, there was someone from CDCR that, and I get multiple pieces in because I've been following the story, obviously, has been, hey, if there's anything there, it was there before we got there. It's not us, it's something that would have been there. They're still claiming that on their tests.
Well, I don't believe that's true. This problem has not cropped up overnight. There's a history of it that goes back to at least 2006, when they had discovered the PERC, which is the dry cleaning chemical coming out of the dry cleaning plant that went to an adjacent water well off their property. And at that point, they discontinued the use of the dry cleaners. So there is a...
And I will say, we've done some private testing. My ownership did some testing on the sides of some wells, and we are not seeing off the charts contamination, so to speak. We are seeing some some anomalies similar to coliform, higher level, but nothing that is necessarily like a panic attack, but it is...
But nothing's changed.
No,
from January, where this was uncovered, and the Regional Water Board pretty well identified what the constituents in that waste stream were. Nothing has changed in a year and 4 months.
Well, it's interesting to me, so we've had a meeting in front of the Board of Supervisors, and Mule Creek and CDCR said, and the Water Board said, we're looking into it, and they said, good, glad you're looking into it.
Right.
I've been down in front of Island City Council and basically said, well, they're looking into it, but they're not, don't seem to be moving very fast, and should take 2 weeks. It's now,
Right, yeah.
And then the other piece to it was they owe you, by the way, they owe you a sewage treatment plant that they just never built.
Right.
Off the original contract.
Well,
where are you getting, when you get out there, and then of course I've talked to Senator McClintock, or the county, we've talked federally, state, locally. No one seems to be doing anything.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot more of an explanation. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but the source of this contamination is one part of the problem. The next part of the problem is how do you solve it? It's a very difficult, expensive fix. And I think because of that, the Regional Water Board has been advised by CDCR that we don't want to find this right away. And everybody collectively are dragging their feet to such an extent that nothing is happening.
Well, it is interesting. So the Regional Water Quality Control Board, in dealing with, for example, the city of Jackson or the county, if they've come in after a storm and see a rise in whatever tests that they are running, and there's a lot of them, they will fine and come down that day and say, okay, you owe several $1,000s, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And in fact, one of the county meetings, the same meeting that they were talking about this contamination at Mule Creek that's admitted, they also were looking at the dump site and saying, okay, to the county, you're going to have to pay upwards of $800,000 to $1.5 million to put a cap that has no contamination record, but we think you need to do it. This one, we know something's going on, and by the way, you know how much they got fined for that?
Nothing. Not a penny.
Haven't been fined in a year and a half for known contamination.
Right.
They continued. They also opened their floodgates during a heavy rain more than once, I believe.
March and April, there was everybody will recall, there was a significant rain event that came through.
So you've got two state agencies, and you're saying you think they're covering for each other, or certainly...
I think there's, somebody has some explaining to do. And with that in mind, I, among others, have asked for EPA to step in. It certainly demands some greater scrutiny by people who have the authority. These are Clean Water Act felony violations, numerous felony violations, and nothing's happening.
And really hits the federal waterways if you follow it down.
It does. Mule Creek is a tributary of the McCollum River, and these are waters of the United States. There is absolutely no doubt this is a Clean Water Act violation, ongoing, with no end in sight. And you make a good point that you have instant penalties and
Oh no, I mean I've had different agencies, and I'm not going to put anyone on the spot out there, but I've had, let's say, some cities maybe or some that have come in and said, man, this Regional Water Quality Control Board, they are criminal, they are holding us under fire, and it's basically extortion. They're like, I mean, I've had some very angry, and let's take it outside the area. I've had city managers outside of Amarillo County call me and say, hey, guess what? You're about to get fined. They just hit us, they're gonna come your way, and they actually have like a pattern that they say, okay, get ready, and it's occurred. Then you run into this at the state level, and it's like, hey, they're on our team, so we don't have to. It's almost like they pick and choose who they're going to.
Yeah, they're playing favorites. And
Yeah.
I on February 7th, I believe it was, a number of the local residents and myself went to the Regional Water Quality Control Board meeting before the full board, and pointed out that there's serious lack of enforcement, and it appears as though the state of California is incapable of enforcing these rules on the state of California.
Well, and I know even on the water board, we've asked, and they went through a permit change that's illegal in the middle of all this, by the way. Mule Creek State Prison suddenly gets a different permit that allows for different variances, which...
Right, and that was during that meeting. They asked for and were granted a change of their stormwater permit for what they're allowed to discharge, and it became an EPA rule, which is called MS4, and that is allows for some exceedances, I think is the exact word that's used in the permit. Exceedances, but that does not include sewage. And when we pointed out that combined flows that would include sewage flows means that designation is absolutely prohibited and illegal. And the board ignored that and gave them that designation anyway. So
there's certainly interesting pieces, and this is a very complicated story, and what, and I've seen pieces from saying, hey, look at these pipes on the bill, we think they're corroded. It's hitting the clay of Ion's geography and shooting outwards, and that's why it's coming from every direction.
Mm-hmm.
And never really get an answer on that. They haven't looked under the buildings, don't know that they are. They claim they will be done, I thought it was the end of this month. They'd say they were gonna have looked under the building, and then all of a sudden, now it's October of this year.
well, there was a work plan that the regional board shared with me, and it has a schedule, but it doesn't have dates on the schedule. And all I can see as far as dates for certain is there's a claim that there will be a final report issued on this phase of investigation by October of 2019.
Well, I know I called the regional water board and have asked, and I think they said to me that it would be the end of April. The report says October. So what we'll do is, certainly in an interview and in all fairness, we'll get to see if the regional water board wants to come down and talk about their work plan and what they've seen. For the folks out there, there is unknown source of contamination still going on. It is being investigated, but they have not looked where we suspect it is.
Mm-hmm.
And no one seems to, as far as government, seems to be looking in. I guess, is it getting people to call? You need them to call or write, or who do they talk to?
I have right now a request in with McClintock's office asking for them to encourage EPA to step in and do their own investigation. But I think it's criminal to do a felony Clean Water Act violation of discharge, but I think it's even worse that anybody would cover that up. And I also would like to see U.S. Attorney's Office look into this, because it's probably one of the most egregious examples of contamination I have ever heard of. And
or personally witnessed.
Personally witnessed, yeah. To view it is stunning.
Well, I know for me, you do the series. We did the series in the paper, and like I said, it gets done after 8 weeks, and then it I was waiting to see what would happen, and we're still waiting to see what happens. We need you to write. I would suggest talking to Frank Bigelow at the state level. Certainly talk to McClintock's office. Dana Jorgensen has an office here that serves, I think, both of those offices that you can talk to. But I would definitely suggest, and I would suggest getting phone calls, letters, whatever you can do. If you are in Ione and think this problem has been solved, or that we went away and no, it has not been solved. In fact, near as I can tell, not much has been done.
There is a huge aspect to this. Like you said, the geology of Ione is probably what brought this to everybody's attention, because it doesn't perk down very easily. The clay is impervious, and it might send some of this waste sideways, and that's how we saw it. But it kind of lends yourself to think, you know, if we have the same conditions and the same pipes, but we don't have the same geology in the other prisons, is it happening there?
Well, and there have been cases that we looked at when I was doing my research for the story. There are cases at other prisons built the same way this one was, at the same time, that have had issues, but it hasn't showed up as much because it's going down into the groundwater. So, but they have been issues at every single one.
And we've discussed this with the regional board, and I haven't seen any reaction whatsoever. So
No, I know of no other investigations at any other prison sites from the water board. Mule Creek, like I said, they've claimed they're working with CDCR to do the investigation. It's just odd that they wouldn't pick the one spot that someone who's been sick from a work site, been personally affected, that's been personally witnessed it, that's seen it, that helped build a drain system, and they say, no, we're not going to look there. We're going to start back at the end here. And I do understand when I talk to the plumbing guys, they said, well, that's what you do. You start at one end and go back. Well, it's like, well, they know where it's gone. And in fact, I've talked to some retired electricians out there that said, oh yeah, the electric boxes fill up all the time. Everything out there fills up all the time. And yeah, it's hitting clay, and we've known it for years. I mean, you know, and it's an amazing, it's just dumbfounding.
it is, and I think the part that is really concerning is the level of apathy that's gone on in the media.
Well, and the interesting thing will be, I think, and I couldn't believe, you know, you were sick, 3 of your workers were sick with similar symptoms or different symptoms to different severities. We don't know if that was the soil or the water. Suspect it's the soil, it's flood. But the water piece, it's kind of sad. It's one of those deals that until you see someone get wiped out, I mean, what's it going to take to get it done? And I don't know the answer other than I think someone's going to get really sick, or years down the line, they're going to say, okay, yeah, now we can tell you what's going on because we've got our plan in place and we'll fix it now. But by then, how much contamination have you done?
Right. You could have a plume that's underground that's migrating, and nobody's really looked into it. Has it crossed the highway, or where is it going? The surface discharges are going down Mule Creek. You certainly, and I understand that there's some sort of expansion going on to Castle Oaks.
Well, like I said, when we've looked at ours, we've seen some anomalies in the water, nothing off the charts, but also it's interesting from the standpoint of talking to the Regional Water Quality Control Board, that they say we're going to look at they say we're not going to look under this. I've had one person that actually said when we wrote letters to the state, they said, no, we're not looking there. And then another one jumped in and said, a different officer said, oh, no, wait a second, we are looking there. So there are some fishy things going on. But for you guys at home, David, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
And for you guys at home, write letters, and hopefully we see some sort of action taken to find out what's going on under that prison and keep Amador County safe. So thanks.